Yeah. So I was looking into this too. I think, what is it? Microsoft has the AutoGen. Uh, is that right? Yeah. So Microsoft has this AutoGen platform, which is basically a botnet framework. So you can create these different agents and then have them all talk to each other. And what was interesting, so I've actually gotten to a point now where I enjoy talking to my computer more than typing. So I have, this fancy setup, and I dictate to ChatGPT as I'm kind of going through my workflow, because a lot of my work is creative, a lot of it is strategic, a lot of it I have to really sort of think through some complex problems, and there's a lot of information that I have to draw from. So even if it's something like research or note taking or that kind of thing, but to your point, I have to copy and paste that information into disparate systems when I want to either pull from something or I want to, convert it or store it to something else. And I wish I could be like, okay, go do it. Right?
Yeah,
like go
totally
put this in my Notion, go put this up in my Google Docs, send this in an email, right? Turn it into a PowerPoint presentation. Like do the work. Don't just, draw from Google and then tell me what I need to go do to other things. So I kind of see that as sort of the next frontier, or at least where a lot of companies are working on today. That's like a step beyond the GPT wrapper that everybody tends to do. It's like, okay, cool, go do that, but now actually make it a meaningful workflow for me.
Yeah, I'm on board. Whenever that ship is sailing, just let me know. I'll buy a ticket. I mean, in fact, it's funny. In fact, so I'm a little bit of a curmudgeon when it comes to technology. So I like work in Debian and i3, like not very widely supported systems or anything like that. So I've begun to try to do some of those pieces on my own. I will let you know how that goes. It'll be on GitHub at some point. But I have this DARPA funded project at the university right now called Millie, which is all about your AI thinking cap, or like AI assistant, which is really supposed to be something. It is actually mixed reality, but if we want to forget that for now, like still like this notion of like you can interact with and talk to your AI agent.
Yeah.
In ways that it can then go and do the thing, like if you're making a mistake, or like you're writing an email. This is not a great example. You get angry, you get an email, you get angry, you quickly like fire up the email account, and your AI agent is like, Jason, calm down, wait a day before you send an email. Like, wouldn't that be great? I think many arguments would be avoided if I had that agent, I think.
Well, so one, again, that's what sort of this AutoGen platform allows you to do, is you can create a GPT wrapper that does the interface, that does the language interface, but then it can go and kick off all these other agents, which can be bots, they can be AI, or they can just be code. And so it's like the next generation of if this then that. Do you remember that platform, or Zapier, or whatever it is, right? It's Zapier, an integration platform that allows you to connect all these different bots, and then you can have AI agents talking to each other and debating and whatever it is, making decisions, and then that goes and kicks off some code that does a task, right?
Yeah, I wonder when we will see the first dissertation fully written by an AI agent, and his or her advisor was also an AI agent. These bots talking.
It probably has already happened. We just, nobody wants to talk about it,
Sure.
But so another thing, so CES just happened last month, and one of the big sort of threads that came out of it are wearable cameras, body cams that can then talk to GPT. And, so there's some video stream, and it's somehow, whether it's video or probably more like still images, uploading it to GPT and asking some questions about it, right? And so it kind of talks to you and gives you kind of tips and pointers and whatever it is about the situation that you're in. But again, the next step is, well, I want to be able to talk to it. So, I mean, the first thing comes to mind is I'm looking at the menu. What should I order that is, friendly with my diet, right? Or, hey, what here do I need to avoid if I have cholesterol problems or something like that? Right. And, or just, I'm going through the world. I'm lost. Where should I go? I'm walking down the streets of Manhattan. I want to get to this restaurant. Okay, I see you're here. Take a right, take a left, that kind of thing. But again, there's this, we're stuck a little bit at this point right now where everything is kind of almost read only, or it's one directional, but we can't really ask the AI to do work for us yet in a natural way. Like, yes, a lot of the AI platforms that are out there allow you to talk to it, and then they have their own, bespoke workflow for whatever the task is, but it's not flexible, right? There isn't a true AI agent that allows me to go.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think unidirectionality versus bidirectionality is one way to describe it. I think there's also a limited element of customization, personalization, perhaps is the way to say it, right? Like, how does it know about your diet, right? Like right now, that would have to be part of the prompt, right? Like you have whatever, K tokens you can send, and but you would need then to like customize your prompt based on what the question is, and then you'd get into these like prompt sequencing and so on.
Yeah.
And it is onerous right now. And I do think that's probably that notion of personalization and bidirectionality. And I think a lot of those problems are, I don't want to say solved in the research domain, and they're just awaiting productization, because I think like the productization, like these products are, in a new field of product classes, right? Like cutting edge software 2.0 plus AI type products. We may need to, like, there may be barriers that will hit, but that are unexpected, even just like signal source separation in audio, right? Like you're walking in Manhattan, it's noisy, someone's right next to you, and they say something about like, you happen to be talking about a food restaurant, and they say Chinese as you're walking by, and you really want a Mexican, and the system got confused, right? Like, I think it will be a while before we really break down like those corner cases, but I think you're getting right at the heart of what's next, and I'm hoping it's next in the near term, but it may be the next after a winter. I don't actually, like this is a little bit of an unknown, right? Because some of these technologies, it's great. Like at CES, that there's more of these like wearable plus like GPT connections, or officers have had body cams for a while now, things like that. But like, researchers have been talking about this stuff for decades, for at least 2, if not 3 or 4 decades or more, and like, I mean, we can hack together a few things, fine, but turning that into something that the everyday user can use is a whole other set of problems that I, as a startup owner, completely respect and think is for really hardworking people to do and invest a lot of research in or work in. Yeah.
Well, that's why, the great universities that I know that, do entrepreneurship well, they pull entrepreneurs from the community, they pair them with a researcher, and they say, okay, go turn this thing into a product, right? Turn it into a business.
100%. Yeah.
Yep. And while we're on the thread, so I live and breathe this stuff every single day, and I'm also really good at spotting problems. It's hard for me to solve all of them because I'm only one person and I see a lot of things. But one of the things that you're talking about that I've hacked together is around context within ChatGPT. So every time I talk to ChatGPT, it's learning something about me. But then that context is lost anytime I go and start a new chat. It's like I'm starting from scratch. It has amnesia. The only caveat, the only way around that are these custom instructions, which, they released not too long ago, that allow me to put some persistent context about who I am and about how I want it to respond and so on. But it's very limited. There's only a page or so of text that I can put in there, because it's putting it in I believe it's pre-prompting every single conversation with that. And so they want to limit it. But every single one of those if I could mine each one of those chats, pull out the context and then store it in different places. And then if the AI could interpret which context is necessary in this situation and then bring it in. So this is what I do. I have all of these different Notion pages for little GPT prompts, or not even prompts, but like context bits. So, what's my bio? What are my preferences? What's my writing style? Who are my customers? What kind of products do I like or dislike, or what do I care about when I'm doing, so all the different research that I do or all the different work that I do, I do the work once in GPT, and then I say, okay, summarize this in a way that I could paste it back in the future and give you all the context you need. And then I copy that and save it off in some Notion doc. And so then when I go back to say, okay, I'm writing an article, I go to that section and I copy and paste that in. But I would like to not have to do that. And I think most people don't even think to do that. But so something to say, hey, mine my chats, store all of this context about me. And then when I come in and say, hey, I'm ready to write an article, it goes, okay, this is all the context that's relevant to article writing. And again, there are platforms out there that do this in a very thin slice, but there's nothing that actually brings it all together. And what I really want is a generalized assistant. I don't want to work with 10 different platforms that all have different context.
Generalized and personalized assistants for what you do. So here's how. I mean, it's commendable to hear your workflow. That's amazing. I love it. Here's what I'm working on right now that to that end, if you will. So in the end, all of that context is not much different than like embeddings, right? Like you take the language, you take those blurbs and you drop them into some embedding space somewhere. So I've been building embeddings for all the notes I take, all the papers I read, like when I summarize results of the papers, my output, and then like when I have a question about things, I will embed a query into that space and pull out the most relevant notes from these, in that embedding space. Mm-hmm. It's not connected to a GPT right now. It should be, right? Like that's like the next step. But for me, that's as the world's gotten bigger and broader, remembering the context is harder and harder. But I find that, I'll often take I'll read an article or like even get an email or whatever. But I do like kind of manually put these into this sort of box of embeddings and use a nearest neighbor search for that. So I think there's a lot of things people do to hack together, like for what they want. But like both of these are in the direction of like, if I can unlock the power of like broader memory, that's context specific, and if that context includes a goal, then that's definitely game changing.
Yeah. So one last kind of topic that I want to get into. So we are, I would say, kind of past the crest of the hype cycle, at least as it pertains to large language models, meaning a lot of SaaS companies or a lot of startups came out in the last couple of years that basically are a GPT wrapper. Essentially, they're a feature that ChatGPT will ultimately include, and then they'll be out of business. And so there's going to be the inevitable crash. And then from those ashes, the real durable companies are going to emerge that solve real problems, with AI, or at least with large language models. Again, there's so much frontier on, computer vision and other things. But where do you think are the most like dangerous places to be now as an entrepreneur, but then also where you think the real meat of all this stuff is, where there's real sort of untapped potential leveraging AI?
It's a good question. So, I mean, I definitely agree that the GPT wrappers are fairly straightforward to be dissolved. That's a very risky place to be in. I would worry about. I imagine there might be a subset of those that are in the medical space that may be a little bit more defensible. Right, just because domain knowledge and custom GPTs in that space or custom sort of language models might be there. And I do want to mention this notion of like open source AI, right? Like I don't know. I do kind of wonder if the open source AI model will outmode the closed SASE way of doing current LLMs and GPTs, even if it's only to get more confidence in what's being fed to the model for training and accessibility to the model. But let's see, what are some other types of utilities? So there was a wave of companies that were doing like chatbots as well, even like GPT based chatbots. I'm sorry, but I don't think there's a future in that market. Then maybe one that's a little bit more contestable, because even I wrote an article on this last month, I think. The title of the article is "Annotation is Dead." And it's this notion, right? So whenever you're doing supervised machine learning, and in this case, it was mostly about computer vision, but like, you take raw data, develop a protocol to how to, based on your problem you want to solve, you get that data annotated with labels, and then you go train models on that data. The budgets in Fortune 500s for annotation were ridiculous for the last 5 to 10 years. I think that, those companies will need to reinvent themselves in order to survive the waves of Geminis and GPT-4Vs and other like large vision models or large multimodal models. Even if it's, and I'm seeing a lot of output, which is like a lot of people saying like, well, let's just take these large models, use them to annotate our raw data, and then go train our own models for that. And I'm like, why do you want to do that, right? The model's already there. You need to rethink the way your assumptions are broken in that sense. So, I mean, I do think there's a future for annotation in what I might just call kind of like, there's a word that's escaping me right now, but basically like creating gold standard data sets for various like liability reasons or, certification reasons. Like that's fine, right? Humans are good at that and so on. But I do think there's much less of a greenfield frontier in annotation. And there's more work in understanding how to create good data sets for your your domain. That's like how to do that well. Good problem, really strong problem. And I just don't think there are many companies that appreciate that as a problem itself. And
that's a really good point. So to kind of unpack it a little bit, where we are now, where everybody's trying to slap GPT on everything, it often goes off the rails. It goes haywire. It hallucinates. It makes bad recommendations because the technology is still fairly nascent, but because the companies aren't great at tuning their data. They either don't have a great data set, the data is inaccurate, or they're just not really good at training or modeling it. And so they put this agent on top of it that is, again, flexible and kind of open-ended, sort of taking some of the guardrails off of a traditional, like we have a hard enough time with traditional SaaS platforms with data getting broken and bugs and things like that. Now we take this very open-ended thing where I can say whatever I want to it, and it's going to do its best to interpret, and it's built on some data set that is questionable. And there is something that's happening now, which is like chatbot fatigue, right? The idea that, well, I don't want to have to talk to every single app in my life. I want to maybe talk to one, but I still just want to click some buttons and just get through the thing. Right. And I think that may actually cause some disruption in the industry if a lot of people screw it up. Kind of like what happened with blockchain, right? Like in a large sense, the credibility of the technology was undermined by all of the fraud and the misuse. Similarly here, that you can have if everybody does AI or does chatbots in the wrong way, it's going to cast a shadow over the whole industry, and people are going to reject it outright. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it is. I mean, great points, right? Like it is. High level macroscopic comment is that the market's going to do what the market's going to do, right? We have so little control over the way people at this scale interact and build out things and so on. I'm reading this book called A Hacker's Mind by Bruce Schneier right now. Fantastic book about like just at this high level, right? Like in some sense. But nice. A couple things came to mind. So I have these open office hours every Monday, and I actually just came to here from there. And I was having a chat with a gentleman named Todd Morley about benevolent LLMs, like benevolent hallucinations, right? Like, and so there might be some gold in some of those mistakes that are being made, right? Like
Yeah.
this notion that, so I gave this example. So I was working with ZMQ and TK Enter a few months ago for actually this Millie DARPA project actually, and they do not talk nicely together, those two libraries whatsoever.
Mm.
So I was like, okay, let me just ask GPT. I need to do this. Like, so I prompted it as well as I could, and it gave me a very convincing description of like the API that I need to use and so on. And it was a hallucination. It was not there. Like the way to do what I wanted to do was not there. However, like what it created for me was the way to do it. It was a beautifully done.
Yeah.
Like like if I wanted it done that way, I would. If I was like one of those library creators, I would have done it this way. But it took me like 2 hours or so to like go and diagnose that. Oh wait, I can't. It doesn't exist. And I would like that was like I think characterizing that as like a benevolent hallucination. It's almost like that's to me in some sense that is creativity,
Mm-hmm.
right? So now back to your I guess the question. I mean, there are many ways of getting it wrong. I think, right? Like, and I think, like as we were just saying, like if the future is these like personalized, like generalized, personalized bots that really know who you are, what you want to do in different ways, and so on. Like, I think that's the great potential, and I think what I hinted at it earlier, that might also be we still might see a winter first before we see that realized,
Mm-hmm.
because there are so many ways to get that wrong. Like even like at Voxel51, we made this package called Voxel GPT last spring when 3.5 Turbo came out, and it was hard to get it right. Like 51 is a Python library that's I don't know something like 2 million lines of Python code. It's pretty sophisticated, right? Like it's not easy to get started, and obviously we want to have a lot of users adopt us and so on. So we wanted to create a GPT that would allow us to allow new users to learn the library faster.
Mm-hmm.
But it took some weeks to get it right, and we had to it's 3 layers of prompting, I believe, maybe even more. And we have hundreds of examples that are fed and selected to feed for various prompts. And so without that level of attention, level of detail, in that work, it could have failed completely and would have been useless and maybe even have harmed us. And I can see that
Mm-hmm.
It took a couple of frankly pretty smart people to get that right. I guess I'm not sure there's a good science yet of how to do that. And I agree that if we get it wrong, it could be detrimental to the growth. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had this conversation, with another or on another episode, but how you talked about annotation is dead. With
Mhm.
AI, QA is dead.
Mhm.
It's pretty much impossible to QA these platforms because they're so
Right.
open-ended. And so we're just naturally opening ourselves up to a lot more quality issues. And when it matters, it's going to cause some real trouble. It is causing real trouble. I mean, I think a lot of the churn or retention problems, at least that a lot of SaaS companies are having that have shoehorned GPT into their platform, is this inability to really test it.
Yep. I mean, you are. I mean, I think that's the right way to think about it. I definitely do. So, and it's not. So this came up in some work I was doing recently about open source AI. But the what you commented on is something like, these AI systems we're building are these black boxes that we don't really understand.
Mm-hmm.
We actually don't have the right computational science or mathematical science to go and ask very detailed questions about yet. We don't know that. Right? That's definitely a good problem. So how do we have to study them? Well, we have to kind of act like psychologists, almost like AI psychologists, and actually set up these experiments in which we are diagnosing what's going on in these black box AI systems. And I think the notion of reproducibility in those types of experiments is undefined right now and needs to be defined. And at the same time, it's almost like those systems can change on a regular basis, right? Like we've seen reports of, I asked GPT-4 this on Tuesday, and then the next Tuesday, it said something different, right? So okay, which version of the AI black box are we looking at today, right? Like it's going to be, I mean, it's a great time to be a scientist in some sense, right? Like that's a great problem to have, but it could cause some very many social challenges about comfort levels, even privacy, or like we're, I think it's going to be curious. I'm curious to see what we'll find about that.
It reminds me of like Westworld. We need like a diagnostic mode where I can say, I want you to inspect yourself and tell me why you came up with that decision that you made, because I can't go in there and figure it out. Yeah.
Right. just like we have to ask physicists like how they solve a problem that are humans, right? Or even kids, like, how did you get to that answer? My son, speaking of math and arithmetic or algebra, like he can get to the right answer almost all the time. He cannot tell me always why he gets to the right answer. It's really amazing. Yep.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Jason, it's been such a pleasure talking with you. I appreciated the time and being able to geek out with you about this really amazing field. So thank you again, and have a wonderful day.
Likewise, Eric. It was a great pleasure. I really enjoyed it.